Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello, my dear students, fourth year students in the Department of English. Today, our lecture is related to a successful instruction giving. Today I'm presenting you with certain tips for successful instruction giving. First, we start with effective presentation. What's meant by effective presentation or the idea of a presentation? We mentioned last year in our explanation of methods of language teaching that the process of language teaching consists of presentation, practice, and production. First, the teacher presents the language material, then give the students the opportunity to practice the language material and tasks introduced, and then the students, or finally, the students will be able to produce the language material after having enough practice. It would seem fairly obvious that in order for our students to learn something new, a text, a new word, how to perform a task, they need to be first able to perceive and understand it. One of the teacher's job is to mediate such a new material so that it happens in a form that is most accessible for initial learning. This kind of mediation may be called presentation. So, what is required from the teacher in order to have effective presentation of language material? The first idea is attention. What's meant by attention? It means students' attention. Before you start presenting any activity, you should make sure that you have your students' attention. So you can do this by using different techniques. For example, stop talking till all the students are paying attention to you, and in this case you can start the introduction or the presentation of the activity. The learners are alert, focusing their attention on the teacher and or the material to be learned, and aware that something is coming that they need to take in. You need to make sure that learners are in fact attending. It helps if the target material is perceived as interesting in itself. And sometimes, if the students are interested in the learning material, they will pay attention. But in all cases, you should attract your students' attention to you before you start any presentation or before you start giving an instruction, in order to make sure that all of them listen to you and understand what you want them to do. So make sure that you have the class's full attention. In ongoing language practice, learners' attention may sometimes stray. They can usually make up what they have lost later. But if you are explaining something essential, they must attend. In this case, when you have important information that you think the students are supposed to learn, you should make sure that you have the students' full attention. Especially if this is the only chance that they have to get some vital information. If they miss bits, they may find themselves in difficulties later. So, the students need to understand this idea. You can attract their attention by saying simply and briefly that what I'm going to explain is very important. That's why I want you to pay attention. One of the implications of this when giving instructions for a group work task is that it's advisable to give instructions before you divide the class into groups. So, before We say now we will start a group work or you will work in groups. Tell them about the instructions and the steps that are supposed to be followed by the groups, different groups. And when you say start working in groups, this means that they should start the activity and that they have full information about what is required from them. So once they are in groups, learners' attention will be naturally directed to each other rather than to you. Sometimes it's better to present information more than once, to repeat what you introduce twice in order to make sure that your students have understood what you want them to do. A repetition or paraphrase of the necessary information may make all the difference. As you see, we say the necessary information, and not you should not repeat everything. You should repeat only very important points, very important parts of the instruction. Learners' attention wanders occasionally, and wanders occasionally, and it is important to give them more than one chance to understand what they have to do. Also, it helps to represent the information in a different mood. For example, say it and also write it up on the board. Sometimes it's usual to say the information and write it on the board so that the students will be given two chances to perceive the information, number one, and number two, they can look at the steps on the board. So you can present the information more than once and in different modes. At the same time, during your presentation and during giving instructions, you need to be brief. You should not talk too much in or during giving instruction. The language of instruction should be divided into short parts, and your language should be clear so that the students understand what you want them to do. So, learners, in fact, or all of us, have only a limited attention span. They cannot listen to you for very long at maximum concentration. That's why you need to be brief. Make your explanation as brief as you can, compatible with clarity. This should also be clear. You should be brief, clear. You should select simple words, short utterances, so that your students understand what you want them to do. This means thinking fairly carefully about what you can or should omit as much as about what you should include. So, during giving an instruction, you should decide previously what should be mentioned and what should not be mentioned. Don't talk too much while giving instructions, make things clear for the students. Verify who performs the task, you or the students. It is not, for example, necessary for you always to ask the comprehension questions about a text. The students can ask each other questions. So sometimes, in order to increase the students' participation and activity, and we mentioned that this is something very important, in order to increase the students' participation, we can make the students, or one student reads the one comprehension question and the other student answers the question. We can also ask the other students if the answer is correct or incorrect in order to verify the way things are practiced and done in the class. Introduce alternative activities from time to time, such as games, pair work, group work, problem solving, project work. All these ideas are interesting ideas that make the students have some or do the activity with some enjoyment. Change the seating plan for different activities, and for example, where individual students are sitting for pair work so that on different days they are working with different partners. In the case of group work, the students might have fixed groups. So they are divided into groups, and each student knows who are the members of the group, of his or her group. But in the case of pair work, try to make the students work with different students, and don't make the students work with the same partner every time. Try to change the partners, especially in pair work, and this is easy, and we can do it even without changing the seats. So just by selecting names who can work in or as pairs or as partners in the pair. So up to this point, we have covered aspects related to presentation. But we mentioned that language learning is also about practice, not only presentation, because the presentation is the part which is related to the teacher. Now we come to the part which is related to the learner or to the students, which is practice. What is meant by practice? Practice can be defined as the rehearsal of certain behaviors with the objective of consolidating learning and improving performance. So, in order to have better language performance, students need practice. Language learners can benefit from being told and understanding facts about the language only up to a point. So, our understanding from teacher's explanation is limited to a particular extent, and we cannot understand everything or learn. Not only understand, we cannot learn the material explained without practicing this material. And in this case, they can benefit from being told and understanding facts about the language only up to a point. Ultimately, they have to acquire an intuitive, automized knowledge, which will enable ready and fluent comprehension and self expression. And such knowledge is normally brought about through consolidation of learning through practice. So, practice is very important. We can enhance learning by having a lot of language practice. The students are supposed to be engaged actively in the process of language learning. A practice then is the activity through which language skills and knowledge are consolidated and thoroughly mastered. As such, it is arguably the most important of all stages of learning. And some teachers or to some educators, practice is the most important step or stage in the process of language learning. So, hence, the most important classroom activity of the teacher is to initiate and manage activities that provide the students with opportunities for effective practice. From this, we understand the importance of practice. We understand the importance of students' active engagement in the process of language learning. Practice is usually carried out through procedures called exercises or activities. The latter term usually implies rather more learner activity and initiative than the former, but there is a large area of overlap. Many procedures could be defined by either exercises and activities may of course relate to many aspects of language to any aspect of language. Their goal may be the consolidation of learning of a grammatical structure, for example, or the improvement of listening, speaking, reading, or writing fluency, or the memorization of vocabulary. So, in this case, the students' practice enhances the learning of all aspects of language, including language skills and language components. So, in each activity, we have overlap, we have integration between different language skills and language components. And in this case, these students can uh, practice actively and learn from. You should keep in mind that we should increase students' active engagement, students' activity. That's why keep you in your mind that it's the students who needs practice, not you, and as a teacher. There are many ways in which it's possible for the teacher to dominate the classroom linguistically in ways which are quite unnecessary. The more teacher talks, the less opportunity the students have to speak. So in this case, we should keep in mind that we should minimize teachers talk and maximize students' opportunities to speak and practice. But it is the students who need the practice. Teachers should be aware of all the following. First, they should not explain too much. They should not explain when they don't need to. They should not repeat themselves unnecessarily, for example, when asking a question. They should be careful when answering this for the students without waiting long enough. And when you ask the students a question, you should give them enough time to think. And sometimes we have intelligent students who can understand your question directly and answer it. You should not يعني, ask them to respond directly. You should give the chance to other students to think about the answer. Don't correct too much and too quickly. You should correct the students' errors only when it is very, very important, when they have misunderstanding about a particular fact. And when you correct, you should be careful and you should make sure that they have heard you and understood your points.